Greetings, Royal Queens and Kings. It's your host, Queen Tulsa, and we are back with a mystery. A child was deleted decades ago in Georgia, is identified. Mother is arrested in Phoenix. Teresa Ann Black, the mother of a 6-year-old boy found unalived 25 years ago, is expected to stand trial in DeKalb County. Jury selection got underway Tuesday morning in the William Hamilton unalivement trial. Authorities arrested Black in 2022 after authorities got a major break in the case. Well, we have a lot to get into, so let's go ahead and get into it.
Never say they want it. Girls can't never say yeah. Girls can't never say they need it. Girls can't never say nah. Girls can't never say they want it. Girls can't never say yeah. Girls can't never say they need it. Girls can't never say nah. Oh nah. Give it to me like you need it, baby. Want you to hear me screaming, have you breathing. I don't need a reason, baby. I want it till you can't buy. I can get it to you right, baby. I wanna be healing. I can be real good. Please don't get these feelings. Hey, I need some love.
All right, and we are back. You all, please make sure you like, share, subscribe to the channel. As you all are coming in, we've got our banner up, and just remember that this is a reaction video, and we do have to read our disclaimer. Disclaimer under copyright. Oh, disclaimer under the copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is the use permitted by a copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, personal use to balance in favor of fair use. This video was made for entertainment purposes and is transformative in nature. Child to get a tongue twister. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and let's get into the trial. This is actually going to be part 1 of the trial.
Good morning, everyone. On February the 26th of 1999, the skeletal remains of a small child were discovered in a wooded area in DeKalb County at the intersection of Clifton Springs and Clifton Church. This wooded area was next to a cemetery across the street from a church nearby that location. A gravedigger who was working that day happened to walk into that wooded area to relieve himself and came upon this discovery. He immediately notified the police department. Police responded, crime scene investigators, medical examiner's office. The scene was secured and processed, and the remains were recovered. You'll hear that the child was lying on top of a pine straw with no apparent effort to conceal his body, but it was in a secluded area of those woods, a place that he went for a period of months without being found. You'll also hear that the child's skull had become detached from his body and was located between 6 and 7 feet away from the rest of the remains. When law enforcement came and processed the scene, they collected the body, they evaluated the earth below the body, they were able to recover some additional bones, teeth, fingers, and most of the skeleton was recovered. That skeleton was then transported to the medical examiner's office, where a death investigation occurred. You're going to hear from the medical examiner that participated and took part in that autopsy back in 1999, the day after the skeleton was recovered. You're going to hear that when they examined the child, he was clothed. He had a pullover style shirt that was plaid, kind of thermal in quality. He had a pair of red jeans and Timberland boots. After the examination, they determined, based on the size of the bones, measurements that were taken from the bones, as well as the size of the clothing and the shoes, that the remains belonged to a boy. Good morning, everyone.
So that was part one. So pretty much in part one, the body was discovered. She got into detail of how the baby, the young boy looked. And by the articles of clothing, that's how they were able to identify that it was a male.
Roughly 5 to 7 years of age. And that boy had been decomposing for a period of time between 3 to 6 months. That was the estimate of the medical examiner as well as the anthropologist that did the initial investigation. Because the child was so severely decomposed, most of the types of evidence that a medical examiner would traditionally look at to help determine a cause of death was not available. There was very little skin to look for evidence of wounds or trauma. The organs weren't present to evaluate. There was no blood to test. But what was present was a child's skeleton and some tissue around the legs. The skeleton was evaluated, and the only evidence of trauma was a fracture to the right zygomatic area of the skull. That's going to be just under your eye socket. There were no other indications of trauma located on the skeleton. The professionals are going to tell you that they cannot tell you how this fracture occurred. It could be that this fracture occurred after the child's death, while the child was in the woods. It could be a result of carnivorous scavenging animals that may have disrupted the skeleton while the child was out in the woods. That is a possibility. However, you will hear that typically when you see scavenging activity, that's going to be accompanied by teeth marks, scratch marks surrounding the bone as well, and those were not present. You will also hear that this kind of fracture could occur as a result of a traumatic injury while the child was alive. Blunt force trauma. That could be from striking a child, or from the child being in an injury or an accident, such as a car accident, where his face was impacted. But what you'll hear is blunt force trauma in this particular area of a child's skull is not very common. So it is typically seen in use cases where it gets something like a car accident. The examiner had to harvest some of that muscle tissue around the legs, that skeletal muscle, and they sent it off for toxicological examination. When you send tissue for that kind of examination, you're going to hear that what they're looking for is the presence of both illegal drugs and legal drugs. You're going to be looking for your street drugs such as cocaine, crack, marijuana, things of that nature, as well as over-the-counter and prescription medications. Anything that can help give us any indication what might have been going on with this child. And you will hear that 2 drugs and a metabolite were present in the skeletal muscle of this child's tissue: acetaminophen and diphenhydramine. The metabolite was a diphenhydramine metabolite. Now, what the professionals are not going to be able to tell you is how much of these medicines this child had. That is not something they're able to tell you based on what was present in the muscle. However, the metabolite is instructive and can tell us that the child was administered the drug shortly before his death. Those are the only conclusions that the medical examiner's office, in partnership with the toxicologist and the toxicologists were able to make it. And so the child's death was undetermined. That's how his death certificate was filled out. He was listed as a child doe because they didn't know who he was. And that was the findings of the medical examiner's report back in 1999, the day after the skeleton was found. From that point, you're going to hear about the Herculean effort by the medical examiner's office, the DeKalb County Police Department, to try to identify this child and determine why he ended up in those woods and what may have killed him. You're going to hear about how the neighborhood was scoured and canvassed for any witnesses. They spoke to members of the church. They sent bolos out to nearby area law enforcement. Are there any missing children that match this description, these clothing, this age, this gender? In any of that information was sent out nationwide in databases that could be accessed by law enforcement all over the country to compare against their missing persons cases. The medical examiner's office worked with the Federal Trade Commission to track down the manufacturers of the child's shirt and pants and boots, and then worked with those manufacturers to try to determine if they could pinpoint where those clothing items were sold. They reached out to the media. There were news stories. The AJC printed articles, all soliciting information about this child who had been found in the woods, giving details about the clothing that he was wearing, anything that they knew about him, and asking the community for help. At one point, even the governor signed a proclamation, issued an order that any tips leading to the identification of this child would be rewarded with a $5,000. And that was published to the community at large as well. But the case went cold. This child was not identified. There were tips, there were leads, they were all explored, and they were all excluded. From that point, the child was packaged and placed in a cabinet at the medical examiner's office, where he was known as a child doe or Clifton Doe until the point at which he could be identified. With no family to return his remains to, that little boy's skeleton sat in the medical examiner's office for over 20 years. For over 20 years. It wasn't until a very special person who happened all this time that the DeKalb County Police Department was trying to identify this child, happened to also be searching for him. And it wasn't until she came across an artistic rendering of this little boy that we were able to determine who he was. See, over the years, while William may have been placed in that cabinet at the medical examiner's office, he was not forgotten. That information was sent. Stories continued to be written. Podcasts were created. There were clay renderings made of what the child might have looked like. Artistic drawings of the child might have looked like. These were published through both law enforcement and organizations dedicated to children, missing children, and unidentified deceased children. One of them, known as the National known as NCMEC, actually published one of these renderings that was seen by this woman who knew who the little boy was. And this woman's name is Ava McNeil. Ava McNeil looked for William all those years because she was a friend of William's mother. She met William's mother back in 1995, and they became very good friends. William was about 3 at the time, and she took a real shine to him. She's going to tell you that William was a bright, sweet child, and that she became very attached to him. She and Teresa spent a lot of time together. They were neighbors, they lived very close by, and at one point they were spending almost every day together. So William was a big part of Ava's life. But she worried about William because William didn't seem to have a very good life. William seemed to have a tough time. She's going to tell you how Teresa was not very loving towards William. She spoke roughly towards him, that William often appeared dirty and disheveled, that his clothes smelled as if he wasn't being bathed, that his hair was not routinely cut, and that the school even complained about his odor to his family. This was despite the fact that Teresa took care of herself. You'll hear that she often had her hair and makeup done, had her nails done. She had a good job. She was living with her father at the time and his girlfriend. And before that, her mother, before she passed away. She had access to resources. She didn't share them with her son. You're going to hear that Ava would ask to take William out because she felt sorry for him. He didn't seem to ever get to leave the house. He didn't seem to get to play like normal children. Teresa wouldn't let him. Other people felt sorry for William too and would get clothing and toys to Teresa. But Teresa would just put them in a closet and never give them to him. Ava will even tell you about 2 separate incidents where she observed Teresa become physical with the child in a way that bothered her. On one occasion, the little boy complained about something he was eating, and Teresa slung him into another room and came after him, and Ava had to intervene so the child could run out of the house. In another incident, the little boy wanted to go outside and play. Teresa wouldn't let him, and when he got upset, she punched him in the chest and called him a punk. This was the life that William Hamilton was living. Ava McNeil reported to Nick Mick that this is who that little boy was. That he was the child of Teresa Bailey. And with that information, they went to North Carolina. They investigated. They were able to pull William's birth certificate. They were able to find a little boy from Charlotte, North Carolina, whose parents were Teresa Ann Bailey, now Teresa Black. And his father was William Harris Hamilton. From that point, they went to the father. They found him in Charlotte, North Carolina, interviewed him, and he indicated he did have a son named William, but he had lost contact with him when he was a small child, that his mother had prevented him from seeing him, so he didn't have a relationship with him anymore. But he had no idea and was completely shocked to learn that a child that was found dead in the woods in DeKalb County could be his son William. He gave consent to provide a sample of his DNA that was then compared to a sample from the child's remains. And you'll hear that there was evidence of a relationship or support for her son.
Squinting her eyes, moving. Okay, she's making it so I can do it.
Mothers are the safest place for their children. But if they become unstable, that will be the most dangerous thing for the kids.
What are your kids wearing? How are they dressed?
I don't got no red.
In these videos, you will see intoxicated drunk moms losing control over their vehicles and old grumps doing domestic violence. And their intoxication leads them to madness.
And I'm in trouble because I had the car on.
Here are some instances where police detained mothers for intoxication.
There is absolutely no grounds for my arrest.
Our first incident revolves around a grumpy mom named Donna trying to evade charges.
Out of the car. Out of the car, please. Out of the car, please. We're conducting an investigation. I need you to step out of the car. You're not going anywhere. Okay? You understand? Nope. You're gonna step out of the vehicle right now, please. Thank you.
Are you okay with figuring out what her son was insurance?
On July 8th, 2023, officers from the Naperville Police Department in Illinois responded to a call involving a mother engaged in a dispute with her son. Upon coming into contact with the suspect, the officer asked her to step out of her vehicle, informing her that the police were conducting an investigation.
You're being completely ridiculous.
Would you like some ID?
Okay. Why don't you have a seat on the
You
ground?
asked for
Why don't
me.
you, ma'am?
You asked me for some ID. Yes or no?
Well, because you have your purse on
I
you.
went to go get you some ID.
I've got enough for. I was not. I was.
Could
wanted to
I
see
go
the
get
notes to
him
see-
some ID?
I don't need an ID right now, ma'am. I'd really appreciate it though if you could hang tight for a second. Can we do that, please? I would really appreciate
He
that.
asked me for some ID.
I understand.
I am trying to comply with the person who has threatened to arrest me if I do not comply.
Well, ma'am, I'm here now. And
Can
I'm asking-
I
No.
No.
Get
No.
my ID.
No, ma'am.
He wants me
Injury.
to get
So
my
if
ID.
this is gonna go south, we can just.
He wants me to get some
or we can
ID.
detain
May
him,
I
can
get
try
some ID?
No, I don't
Yes
have that.
or no? Do you
No,
have
ma'am.
that on your
But if-
video?
But if she's
that
gonna
he-
continue like this,
Do you
we can
have
do
that on your video
So-
that he asked me for some ID?
No, ma'am, I was not present.
Ma'am, what's your name? What's your name, ma'am?
What's on your ID? What's on your video?
So I'm comfortable with the video I just watched and with the obvious signs of injury.
All right,
I
ma'am,
will
go ahead and
go.
turn around,
This
put your
is
hands
my
on
You're
your
house.
under arrest right now.
Why?
You're under arrest
Why?
for domestic battery. I need you to stop 10
Why?
When the other officer was engaged in conversation with the son, the mother became uncooperative because the officer asked her to show her ID. She went straight into crazy mode. She began to act obnoxious once the officers placed her under arrest.
I have asked
Outside, nothing outside.
multiple times why I am under arrest
You're gonna hurt
for
yourself.
domestic
You're gonna hurt
battery.
yourself, ma'am.
You're
I
gonna
don't want
Could someone tell me?
Murder your
Anyone?
child.
I have a video and obvious signs of injury, ma'am. That's why you're under arrest right now.
Injury of what kind?
That's not locked in.
It's locked,
It's
but
okay, yeah. It's just gonna move tight in.
yeah, I don't want it.
Yeah.
The credit card is not out.
No.
Okay, we're not gonna play the game. Listen.
The woman started yelling and screaming while resisting the arrest. The officers informed her that they had a video showing her son clearly injured. Donna fell on the ground, refused to walk on her feet, and evaded arrest by feigning sleep.
You're walking, drop down. You're walking. I'd ask if you want shoes, but you're not. You gotta get first.
Yeah.
Can you put out her legs either? Donna, you're adding charges here.
You're gonna be audio video recorded while you're in the back of my squad car.
The officer warned her to stop pretending because she was clearly moving. The officers carried her toward the police vehicle. According to the officers, she kept opening and closing her eyes to see if the officers was standing next to her.
Robert 22, I just need one more person because she's twice the size. Just need one person to help me. 22, I'm en route to the jail.
Could you please tell me why I'm under arrest? Could you please tell me why I'm under arrest? Not one single person has told me why I am under arrest. Not one single person has read me my rights. Not one single person has told me why I am in the back of a squad car. Could you, the driver of the squad car, please
That's a lot. From Teresa Black to that woman right there, it was definitely a lot. And then just hearing all of the evidence that was presented, it just really makes you just give me 1 second. I'm gonna bring this up. Okay, so this is a press conference. This right here is a press conference due to Teresa Black.
Being here. I am Sherry Boston, and it is my honor and privilege to serve as the District Attorney for DeKalb County. I am joined today by Deputy Chief ADA Yolanda Lippert, Senior Assistant DA Shannon Hodder, Senior Assistant DA Tyshawn Jackson, DA Investigator Matthew McClendon, and Victim Advocate Christy Palmer, as well as the father of William Deshaun Hamilton, Mr. William Harris Hamilton. Nearly 25 years ago, the body of a little boy was discovered in a wooden area off Clifton Springs Road and Clifton Church Road. An autopsy determined that his remains had been left there, exposed to the elements for 3 to 6 months. Investigators could not easily determine who he was, nor how he ended up there in February of 1999. Despite combing every inch of the area for clues and sharing details with the public about the plaid shirt, red jeans, and brown Timberland boots that the boy had on, no one came forward to identify him. He became known as Clifton Doe, a reference to the area where he was abandoned, and that name stuck for more than 2 decades. But investigators, family, and friends never gave up. While investigators were trying to identify Clifton Doe, family members and others close to William kept looking for him. It wasn't until 2020 that the searches for Clifton Doe and William Deshaun Hamilton would converge. A former neighbor and family friend recognized the unidentified boy as William, thanks to an updated facial reconstruction rendering from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, also known as NCMEC. That tip quickly led investigators to William's mother, Teresa Ann Black, who was indicted in her son's death in 2022. And I appreciate those of you that were here to cover when we had that press conference and we stood in this room on that day where we were able to finally say his name after so long. But today, a DeKalb County jury convicted Miss Black on a charge of concealing the death of another and acquitting her of felony murder charges. While we respect the jury's verdict, I would be lying if I didn't say we weren't disappointed. We still believe she is responsible for young William's death. We are glad, though, that Teresa Black will be held accountable. For decades, she tried to hide the truth about what happened to her son, and that decision had far-reaching effects. People here in DeKalb County and across the country spent years working to find the truth, identify the little boy left in the woods, and return him to the family so that they could lay him to rest in the manner that he deserved. Teresa Bailey may have walked away and abandoned her son in 1999, but today I'm proud to say that the people in this room and in this community never did. Today, William Deshaun Hamilton has his name back, and he will never be forgotten. Sentencing for Ms. Black is scheduled for Friday morning, and under Georgia law, she could face anywhere from 1 to 10 years. While we cannot get into the specifics today, I can say that we intend to seek prison time for this felony conviction. So I would like to take a moment to recognize several people, besides the ones that are standing here with me, who had a hand in today's verdict. Lance Cross, the director of our Major Crimes Unit, Senior ADA Agatha Romanowski, and Senior Investigator Crispin Henry with our Saki team for their preliminary work on this case. The DeKalb County Police Department, specifically Chris Harvey, who served as the lead investigator on the case in 1999. He now serves as the Deputy Director with the Georgia Peace Officer Standards and Training Council, also known as POST. DKPD Lieutenant Adam Quigley, who worked on the investigation with our team, and Director Pat Bailey at the DeKalb County Medical Examiner's Office. And finally, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. We will now open it up for a few questions.
The defense team had said to us that they were looking at possibly trying to appeal the decision of the guilty verdict for concealing the death of another. I mean, you guys fight that one. I mean, obviously you guys, I assume, because you guys aren't happy with how this unfolded, but you want to make sure she's held accountable for something.
Well, Miss Black has every right to appeal her felony conviction as any other person convicted of a crime. It's not unusual in any case for a defendant to file a notice of appeal, and that is her right. And our appellate team will vigorously defend the conviction that we got today in court. Absolutely. I mean, the fact that William's remains lay undisturbed in the woods, subject to animals and the elements and the deterioration of his body, that was really only skeletal remains by the time they were recovered. Of course, there was lots of physical evidence lost. Had his body been discovered quickly, or had Miss Black contacted the police immediately, we would have been able to determine exactly through medical evidence and physical evidence how William died. And that would, of course, make a difference in any case. No, just concealing the death.
I also had a question about charges. We talked to the jury, and their problem was the intent part with felony murder. Now that you know what the verdict is, if you were able to go back, would you charge her with something different?
Absolutely not. This team worked for years on investigating this case, identifying William, and identifying Teresa Black, and then building a case against her and going out to Arizona, where she was now living a new life. And they pursued every avenue and made what I think were and are the best decisions that they could make with the evidence that they had, and never gave up. You'll recall that once we identified William and his mother, we then asked the public, with a tip line to help us. And it was a difficult journey, 25 years later. And people trying to remember where they were and if they recognized her or remembered anything at that time. So this team did an incredible job of tracking down every possible lead. And that's the difficult part. I mean, this is a cold case. And cold cases are difficult to prove, and difficult to even get to an indictment on cold case is a feat. The fact that we were able to take it to trial, even harder. And we did get a jury that said that the death was illegally concealed, and that is a felony conviction.
They did tell us they weren't happy with what, a lot of them weren't happy with the verdict, but they also said that they felt like it was with evidence that they dealt with. I don't know what my question is.
They said it was the fairest based on the law. I mean, your two DAs, the senior ADAs here, you guys did, was very passionate for you guys as you guys were up there for closing arguments and trying to get this case. I mean, do you still believe you have the evidence here that she in fact did kill her son.
I will tell you, if you have not had a chance to go online to our website and read our bill of values that we have set out for the district attorney's office, this office, our philosophy is we do not bring any case to court for which we do not feel that we can prove that case beyond a reasonable doubt. And so, no, this team did not have any doubt about Teresa's involvement in the death of William Deshaun Hamilton. But we understand that is a decision that's made by 12 people in a box every day.
Wow. Well, there you have it. The press conference was had. It's a sad day. And then it's a joyous day. You know, it's sad because, this young man, could have still been here, and then a joyous day is, we received justice. All right. I'm your host, Queen Tulsa. That concludes our true crime. Until next time, so long.